there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to do a really bright card, and this one was kind of inspired, or it reminds me of the art done by Andy Warhol, his pop art that he used to do. So this kind of reminds me of that, but I have this stamp set here called Chicken Family from Technique Tuesday, and you will see this coming up in a few videos. I want to use it in lots of different ways since I invested in this gorgeous little stamp set. And today I am just going to use that one little chicken, which I really like the look of. It's nice and easy to color, and it's just got some clean outlines for me. So I am stamping this down with some VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I'm stamping it onto a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor paper. That is the watercolor paper that I prefer to use. And then I am going to emboss this with some clear embossing powder. And this is just going to make life a whole lot easier on when I come to color these later on. So I'm going to melt that with my heat tool, and then I'm going to move on to creating the backgrounds. Now I just pre-cut myself. I make all of my own card bases, and then I have a whole lot of paper cut here to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I am going to cut that down. I cut it in half and then in quarters to begin with. However, I wasn't sure how big I wanted my pieces to be, but I prefer to start with a little bit bigger and trim it down, or have the ability to kind of trim off mistakes later on. So that's what I prefer. I'm going to use some Crown Me, some Clear Skies, Prom Queen, and Overzealous. These are the Simon Hurley dye inks, and I am using the scrapbook.com rounded foam blending tools, which I find I get a much smoother blend. Now again, this paper here that I have cut down is the Tim Holtz watercolor paper. I find I get much better success blending on this, but use whatever you have the best success with, and I really do stress that. Lots of different people work away at ink blending, and some find it really tricky, and I do think it is something that you eventually kind of master and get used to, but definitely at times I still struggle, so I need all the help I can get. And if using watercolor paper is what helps me, then that's what I'll do. So I use the smooth side of the watercolor paper, and this really does work for me. The rounded foam blenders and the watercolor paper are what I have found works for me. So use what works for you, but this is just how I make the best of ink blending. And you can see I start really heavy down the bottom, and then I want it to be a real ombre. I want it to be obvious that it goes from heavy to light up the top. So I am doing my best to make sure that the ink is absolutely saturated down the bottom. This is going to be a bright card. I want it to be bright and cheerful, and it is going to include a couple of little pun sentiments, which I really like for this kind of card. I had somebody in mind, so I have got nice bright colors, and any colors. You can use any inks to do this, whether you use oxide inks or pigment inks to ink blend, or just use a different medium altogether. I mean, use watercolors, do a watercolor wash. You can still do ombre, use coloring pencils, use gelatos, use whatever that you have and you feel comfortable with, then go for gold. So I have taken those same 4 ink colors, and I'm just going to pop them down onto an acrylic block so I can use them a little bit like watercolors. I am using a water brush here, and I am doing so little shading. I really just color the whole little chicken in. Then I'm going to make his wing a little bit darker, and then the belly just a little bit darker, and then I'm going to color the comb up the top using the next color in the pattern. So to the side of me I kind of have this pattern about how I'm putting the colors on the page, and I'm following that to make sure that I make the chicken the right color to go with the right colored comb. Now you don't have to do this at all, you can just do whatever, but in my head I kind of knew what I wanted and I was going with it. So I am just having fun coloring. This is not stressful at all. There is no real technique to how I'm putting this ink down, but I am enjoying it, and I did have a really nice time because there was nothing complicated about this card, and it was just some really fun bright colors. So again, use whatever you have to make this work for you. And again, you don't even have to use the chicken, use any little stamp. This could just be a plain flower stamp, or even just a shape, a star, anything would be fun for this technique. So it is about having fun. It's about using the most of what you have, because when we invest in these craft products, we really do want to make the most of them. And so that is always my goal. I really want to use things in so many different ways when I choose to invest in it. And that's the same with inks. It's the same with stencils. It's the same with stamps. I want to make the most of them. So that's what I have really enjoyed on my channel. That's definitely my aim. I know that you guys see the stamp sets and things over and over and over again, but I really want you to get lots of different ideas about how we can just use the same things and not have to buy all of the new releases and the new things that come out, because there are some amazing products that hit the market. But I have found in my really small craft space that the less things that I have in front of me, often the more creative I get with them. So here, I know this is not everybody's cup of tea, but I had that leftover ink on my acrylic blocks. So I added a little bit of water and then added a few splashes, more so to the top where the ombre is kind of lightest. And I did really like that in the end. Often I'm not a fan of adding splashes, but I did like that in the finished card. It did add that extra little bit. I am going to fussy cut out these chickens, and I'm definitely going to cut off the legs, because there is no way I am fussy cutting out those, and I'll show you how I get around that a little bit later on. When you are fussy cutting images right up close to that black line, it is definitely worth going around with a nice black marker, and this will just make your fussy cutting look like you did an amazing job and get rid of all of those extra little white bits. Then this is where I knew that my pieces were going to be too big, because obviously they are going to go on a card base, and I had just cut them in quarters to begin with. So I ended up making them about 1 3/4 inches by about 2.5, I think, inches, or just under 2.5 inches tall. So I mean, just whatever size card you make, you just want 4 panels that are going to fit on the front. And usually I prefer to do uniform size, the same size panels, but that doesn't mean that you have to do that. So just have a go and see what you kind of come up with. And I knew that I would end up cutting them down, so that didn't bother me at all. Now here's where I'm going to add in the chicken legs, just to make life easier and to make sure they were stamped in exactly the same place every time. I am just going to use a stamping tool. Now you could definitely use an acrylic block, but I did want that uniform kind of look of making sure they were in the same place. So again, I'm just using the same VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I'm adding some removable adhesive just to the bottom corner. And I could have used the magnets, but they kind of get in the way when I am stamping, because it's such a small piece that I'm stamping on. So a little bit of removable tape worked well just there on the back. And then once I have stamped all 4 of them, I hadn't actually placed them out on my card to see what it looked like, but I knew I wanted a little gap down the bottom, and that was going to be where my sentiment was going to go. So I am kind of making sure that these are pretty much evenly spaced. And once I think I've got them in the right place, I will add some matte medium. This is from Ranger, the one that I put into these little squeezy glue bottles. I have videos on how to do that, and I will have links to all of the products that are still available down in the description box below. Now this is a pretty fun stamp set because it has all of these gorgeous kind of punny sentiments that go along with it, and there are lots of sentiments to choose from. So I am going to add a couple of them to this card. You could definitely just stick with one, but I feel like whilst I had the space and they went together, I was going to add a couple. Then at this point, because I had stuck everything down, I did not want to muck up, so I'll grab my little mini Misty again and pop this in so that I don't mess it up at this point. I'm using the same VersaFine Onyx black ink, and that means that everything is still the same color and I'm keeping everything coordinated throughout the card. Because with the mini Misty, I need to turn it around this way so that I can stamp the sentiment on the inside of the card. And this kind of feels backwards or upside down to me. I usually have the lid of my stamping platforms to the left. That's what just feels comfortable to me and feels right. But I'm going to flick it around so that I can stamp the sentiment right in the middle. And then of course I have my little chickens here that I am going to add to the outside. I'm just using the matte medium and gluing these on. Again, I kind of had this little pattern in my head that I was following, so I knew where they needed to go. But that is my card for today. I had heaps of fun creating this one, and it is nice and bright, and the recipient got a right chuckle when they opened it. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this card, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!